Welcome, everyone, to our webinar organized by the Arctic Youth Network and AURORA on the topic Decolonizing Environmental Legal Studies. I will start with a little intro, and I will also give an overview of how we structured this webinar. The next 1.5 hours, we will stop at 5:30 finish time. So the idea for this event came basically from the realization that as us environmental law students, we are primarily exposed to Western perspectives on environmental issues and kind of lack critical discussions on non-Western viewpoints. And this gap leaves us either to self-educate ourselves or that we, as young academics, perpetuating harmful Western mindsets in our future work. So we thought it is definitely time to talk and discuss on this topic. And the aim of this event is basically to address these issues by introducing relevant concepts and theories, and by discussing how to incorporate diverse perspectives into our curriculum. And for that, we have two amazing speakers today with us. Varvara Kokina-Williams, she's a Kumandin Indigenous scholar from Altai, former director of the Center for Indigenous Culture in Russia, and co-chair of the International Conference on Arctic Research Planning. And we have Yulia Yamineva, co-director of the Master Program in Environmental Policy and Law at the University of Eastern Finland, and the director of the UEF UNEP course on multilateral environmental agreements. So a big thank you to you for being here today with us and to discuss on this topic. First, as we discuss sensitive topics today, Anastasia will begin with a terminology of the theories and concepts we will talk about today. And then we will hear from our first speaker, Varvara, for about 20 minutes, followed by Julia. She also will have 20 minutes. And one information for the audience, we did not give Varvara and Julia any guidelines or specific topics to discuss, as the idea is to create a space where our two speakers talk about aspects or experience or perspectives which they consider relevant and important for an event on a topic like this today. And the last part of this webinar will be a question and answer session. We prepared one question for each speaker and as well one or two questions for the audience. And of course, you as an audience will also have time to ask any questions, or you can share your thoughts that came to your mind during this event. And you can write your questions in the question and answer or the question chat box throughout the webinar, so the questions is not forgotten. And yeah, we will talk about this then in the end. Before we start, one thing we want to highlight the sensitivity of the topics we will discuss today, and that it is our collective responsibility to use language that is unharmful, respectful, and mindful. So please, let's ensure that we approach each other with respect. And one last thing, we will send around a survey after this event to your emails. And it would be amazing if you would give us some feedback to this event and to the layout so we can improve and adjust future events. Yeah, so this is all the basic information. And I would say I pass on to Anastasia.
Yes, thank you very much. I first, before talking about some theoretical frameworks that we will use in this event, will take up the point of Frida that this is a very sensitive topic and that both of us, we recognize that we are white students, both Germans, so coming from a nation with a colonizing past. For this event, the purpose is to recognize our positionality and to also recognize that certain terminology needs to be discussed beforehand. So we want to highlight before going into any specifics that when we refer to indigenous peoples, it is important to refer to them in capital, so Indigenous peoples, both with a capital, as this is a protected group of people under international human rights law. So we personally refrain from Indigenous communities or just referring to peoples or natives, though there is differences among the states how they would like to be referred to. Nevertheless, Indigenous peoples is usually the preferred term. Additionally to this, we would like to highlight that if you do not know what specific group a person belongs to, using Indigenous peoples is usually the safe option. But if you know which group peoples belong to, please use their preferred name. So refrain from using terms such as Eskimo and refer to terms such as Inuits or Inupiaq. Furthermore, as we said, we want to talk about some terminology. So this might be the more intense part of the event. I will go over a few theories and terms that we need to have kind of like a baseline on understanding what they mean, so that we understand what we're actually talking about when we speak about decolonization. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll quickly go over certain terms. Do not fret. You do not need to know them by heart after I've said them. It is okay to make mistakes, but we're trying to educate ourselves and help ourselves as students. So all of these materials will be published on the website afterwards. You will get an email for this, so don't worry about it, with information material. But we first need to discuss a little bit what are the terms that we have. And can I just get from Frida an okay that you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So the first terms that we have to talk about, of course, are colonialism. Here I would like to highlight that there's a differentiation between colonialism and settler colonialism. Colonialism is a political and legal domination, a concept of political and legal domination over subordinate peoples. And it uses the logic of a commodification to demand that the peoples of the land and the resources of the land work for the colonizing power. Settler colonialism, on the other hand, is an ongoing system of power that perpetuates the removal of peoples and resources from a certain territory, and is used to replace native communities and indigenous people to establish a settled community of the colonizer instead. So there's these differences between colonialism as making the land and the peoples work for the benefit of the colonizing power, and settler colonialism, which is more focused on removing the indigenous and natives communities, peoples, and resources from the land. Next, we have the term post-colonialism and coloniality. Post-colonialism can be referred to as the historical period that came after a period of colonization. And it addresses those questions that emerge in relation to the aftermath of imperialism. There's a lot of overlap between imperialism and colonialism. I will not go into detail on that right now, but you can look it up. And it is about the emergence of states and conceptions of international order on a temporal scale taking place after colonialism or settler colonialism. Coloniality, on the other hand, is an intellectual and political engagement with the idea that there has never been an interruption between the colonial and modern logics, and it expresses a set of attitudes, values, and ways of knowing that uphold the normative Western colonizing societies to serve, to rationalize, and perpetuate Western dominance. So coloniality is what we will be talking about mostly in this webinar, and what we want to tackle. So coloniality could be considered the system of colonial structures that are still present in our everyday life right now. That could be the preference of Western academic sources. That could be the overwhelming amount of Western academic scientific appraisal. So coloniality is what we will be looking at mostly in this event. And to talk about what is decolonization. Decolonization is generally defined in two different ways. It could be very straightforward, which is the actual process in which colonies become independent, so liberating the colonies and the peoples that have been colonized. The subject of this idea of decolonization is the peoples and the communities, though under social sciences, there's also a very big movement for decolonization, which is a process of questioning the system, such as in our situation, our curriculum, in a way that considers that cultural beliefs behind the system are more focusing on European viewpoints as being more important than the viewpoints of countries that were colonized, of peoples that were colonized. In the social science understanding of decolonization, the object to be decolonized here is the mind and the ideas, the cultures, the meanings, and the worldviews that we accept as the predominant values that we hold in society. So these are the main concepts that we think we need to have a little bit of an understanding about if we continue talking about it. So decolonization for this event, we will define as the critical analysis of our way of living in society, of our way of experiencing also academic institutions and our role that we play in it today, and coloniality as the system in which these institutions are placed. And with that, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Barbara.
As an author, hello everyone, and thank you so much, Anastasia and Frida, for the invitation. In current days, I think it's very important for us to talk to each other and keep our community at least sane and check on each other, but we still here and do what we need to do. And I can say that I love working with youth. So you give us hope that the future will be better. I still have it. And as an Indigenous person, my people were colonized by the Russian Empire, and we were actually double taxed by the Chinese empires. There were different ones, and by the Russian, and in and finally Russia took over Siberia. My people come from we are traders, and economic development and indigenous rights is something that deeply rooted by the history of my people. And at the same time, in 20th century, communities were most of Communities were recognized as a rich people, and our private property were taken appropriated by the Soviet government, and my maternal side of family, all of them were sent to labor camps. And then I'm thinking about what my people went through and how they were resilient, smart, and innovative, that I can be here and still be commanding and have connections to my land. Although I currently reside on unceded lands of Abenaki people, and I'm at Hanover, New Hampshire. It sounds interesting already, right? And it's colonization is even written in geographical names. So today I want to talk about Indigenous peoples' self-determination and Arctic critical minerals, which started to be my interest long time ago, before everyone else figured out that we are facing a green colonialism. And I just knew that then there's a new development, right? When you hear word development, you know that nothing is new, and actually all businesses need to have resources. And when we are talking about resources, all resources are from the Mother Earth, and if it's that, so who holds resources, if not indigenous communities? And especially in a current political agenda led by the Trump administration, we see how they are interested in getting access to critical minerals. It's even in Ukraine or in the Russian Arctic, but we all can see that energy demand is even higher than it was with artificial intelligence and green economies or whatsoever. We need energy. So, and if we are turning from especially if Musk wants to colonize Mars, so he needs even more, right? And it's all of that lead us to understanding that those conversations are highly heated and needed for us to understand how it is seen from the indigenous people's perspectives. First of all, I also want to remind us that Arctic is different. And besides, we have 8 different states. Also, we have different indigenous nations and who are sovereign. And even when we are talking about Inuit communities in Greenland, communities might have different views on development, and unfortunately, that it is very common for governments to use these different differences in their views to separate us. But yes, communities might have different views on development and economic growth, and it's okay, because again, when we are talking about indigenous peoples, the difference, not the us being racially different, right? And that is the biggest problem for current administration, actually, that they see indigenous or Native American and Alaska Native rights as racial. It's not racial. It is land. It is land rights and access to resources, which is which is of course different than racial or cultural differences between us. So and another point which I want to talk about, we are the lands. What I always say when we talk about indigenous peoples, because we are grounded in the lands and we are the lands. That's how we come to differences, because some communities, even if it's same nation, some communities may be traders. Some communities might be depending on salmon or reindeer herders, right? So, and then decisions will be led by the land. So, and that's how we make our choice, right? So, and if a project threatens salmon survival, people would say, no, we don't need your economic development, right? So our economic values is salmon. We need salmon to survive and thrive, and we don't want your mining side right here. Although for for a different community in I don't know, further down, who do not rely as much on salmon, that might be something they can negotiate. So I think that part I wanted to start with, and I'll try to share my screen now. I hope I can. I practice it. I should be able to do that. As I said, this topic is important right now, and oh my God, can you see my presentation?
Yes,
Okay.
we see it.
Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about different projects in the Arctic as examples. And first is Norwegian and, for example, Sami protest against mining in Finnmark, threatening reindeer pastures, and as well with wind farms. Again, wind farms is um, it's hard, right, to separate projects by saying like, okay, wind farms do not mine critical minerals, but then to create a wind farms, you need to get those minerals for production. So for Sami, and I think that Sami is one of the example, then Sami can get together and stand against the company. So and now there is a huge protest led by Sami Parliament in Norway to against mining projects in Finnmark territories, and they demand for free, prior, and informed consent, and stronger environmental safeguards. And this project actually threaten salmon population. When there is a interesting organization, Arctic Economic Council, and director of this, CEO of this organization, he usually talks about positive examples. And I can say that I learned that business loves to live in their own reality. And usually that reality is a reality of opportunities and optimism. So, and usually we talk about good examples or positive examples. And his examples usually is Greenland, because Greenland is definitely waving economic development and environmental risks for their because we all know that for sovereignty we need power and money. So I think that for Greenland now it's balancing economic benefits, which can provide their final and full independency from Denmark, over environmental impacts on traditional Inuit hunting grounds, and of course water and ice. And then you look at the Greenland, there's certainly sovereign communities who want to have those projects on their lands, and more concerned northern part of Greenland, which is not as happy as our communities, right? Again, when we talk about Indigenous representation, it is important to remember that we also have Indigenous entrepreneurs who are interested in participating in such projects. So their voices are also important to hear. So, and then we are talking about Russian example. And here I can go to more details, and I have 7 minutes. I know more about Russian agenda and what's going on, and one of the brightest example, I would say, is Nornickel company, which owns Taimyr and Koilsky region in Murmansk territory, which is Sami land, and Taimyr is Nenets, Evenki, Dogan people living there. Nornickel is a company which actually wanted to sell nickel to Tesla several years ago, and indigenous peoples of Russia started a protest saying Musk save the Arctic. And that was the social media outreach to people, and at the same time advocates and indigenous leaders started to reach out to Tesla board, and they now I understand that it was not possible to reach Musk himself, right? But I think that 4 or 5 years ago, we had a different understanding of Tesla and Musk himself. Anyway, so they were able to get in touch with his brother, and they had negotiation with board members. It was quiet. It was not official. It was not in public. But Tesla finally refused Nornickel suggestion, and also added one line in their documents about human rights and supply chain. So after that, also indigenous leaders from Russia were able to, in exile. I have to say that that was led by indigenous leaders from the Russian Arctic in exile. We were able to collaborate with German environmentalists, and they reach out to German banks. So they withdrew finances from Nornickel, and that hurt Nornickel. So they lost a huge chunk of possibilities to sell nickel to Tesla, and they also lost investments from German financial sector. And then they figured out that they have to do something, right? So we have to get to the point, then they say, like, yes, now we have indigenous peoples of Taimyr on board. And I have a report which I helped I identify identify the problems with such thing, led by Artida project about non-nickel and actually indigenous people's rights in the Russian Arctic. I can share with your network, so it can be published. But basically, yes, they created some sort of guidelines for non-nickel. So they also invested a lot of money into indigenous diplomacy, and now I think that it looks better. But Norwegian also caused one of the largest ecological catastrophes in the Russian Arctic lately. So they spilled 700 tons of gasoline into rivers, and they even wanted to pretend that it never happened. But even Russian Ministry of Natural Resources said like, no, you have to pay for that. And of course, why I brought up non-nickel, because it is one of the again brightest example how companies try to play with a book than the when environmental activists and indigenous peoples work together, and we push people to recognize how rights and companies step back, regroup, and create new approaches. And then I started my talk. I was talking about I really believe that indigenous peoples are innovative, that they need to regroup as well, and think better what we have to do to make them decolonize themselves, right? Sounds crazy, but why not? So that's how it looks from my perspective. And I also know that Anastasia, you wanted to me to talk about how we work with the Arctic research agenda. I'm a project lead and program project manager for project called Indigenous Arctic Research. We started this project 2 years ago for creating a space for indigenous knowledge holders to participate in International Conference on Arctic Research Priorities, which will happen. ICARP for summit will happen in Boulder in a month, and why we thought it's important, because indigenous peoples are small in numbers and we have a limited capacity, and especially indigenous peoples organizations. But at the same time, we can see how science creates priorities and ideas and approaches which will be our will become our reality in 10 years, for example, right? So, and I still think that indigenous peoples must participate in knowledge creation in science. So, and for that we started a project, and now we have 100+ members, indigenous knowledge holders, who participate in this process to set up indigenous people's priorities. And what we are trying to do, we are trying to bring as many Indigenous peoples to the process and center Indigenous knowledge for next decade, hopefully. I'm also a co-chair for research priority team number 3. We have a long name, but actually we are we work with social economic systems and sustainability. Before January 20th this year, we had a good process on that, and I hope that we will be able to write a document on behalf of the Indigenous peoples of the Arctic for ICARP 4 Summit with Indigenous peoples priorities. Beside everything what's going on right now in the United States, although our project was flagged as a I don't know, neo-Marxist and racial discriminatory project approved by the Biden and Harris administration by Ted Cruz. So, and that is unfortunately, of course, but again, piece of hope and optimism. We are not sent to labor camp. And hopefully won't, right? So I think we figured it out. But yes, I think it was 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you,
very much. Yeah.
Oh, no, I forgot. I'm sorry. So I didn't say about solutions. Sorry about that. I looked at my screen and figured it out. So solutions for facing we need a consultation and free prior informed consent. Also, we need to balance economic development with environmental and cultural preservation, and importance of robust legal frameworks that recognize Indigenous rights. And that part, I think, will be great to collaborate with the future environmental scientists whom I hope I have in the audience, or someone who will be watching this webinar online. Now I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, first of all, for bringing the concepts that I've mentioned into context so that we have some real life cases that we can now connect to these concepts and see the importance for people's lives. When we talk about mineral extraction, when we talk about green transitions, when we talk about any sort of resource extraction. Second, we wanted to really highlight the work of ICARP and the importance of the work that you're doing at ICARP, because in our study, we are often seeing Indigenous peoples as peoples to interview, to find out information about a topic that we're researching. And at ICARP, you are centering Indigenous peoples as the researchers themselves. So we wanted to highlight that no, Indigenous peoples are not only an object of our research, but no, they are their own subject, creating their own research, and should be. So that was very important for us to have you here also for that reason. And you already mentioned green colonialism, and I will shortly explain the concept now. I hope you can see my screen again. So green colonialism, carbon colonialism, or CO2-lonialism, what is that? In now going towards our environmental legal studies, these are concepts that I think, or we think you should also know about. So green colonialism, what is it? Green colonialism occurs when the global north achieves a high standard of living. sustainably often by exploiting the health, labor, and the land of the global south. And it also occurs when green energy transitions or climate policies are violating the rights of indigenous peoples, like the cases Barbara has just mentioned, or like the very famous Fosen case that I expect many, if not all of you, are quite familiar with. Another term that has been popping up over the last 10-15 years has been carbon colonialism or CO2 colonialism. I would very highly refer to works of Sultana and Dawson, who explain these concepts as a concept which persists where Eurocentric hegemony, neocolonialism, capitalism are co-constitutive of climate and ecological impacts experienced by various racialized populations, and also unsustainable behavior and policies of the wealthy, which creates mounting environmental and social calamities for indigenous peoples and global minorities. And with these ideas in mind, now turning to our experience as environmental legal scholars and students, I would like to give the floor to Yulia Yamineva.
Thank you, Anastasia. Can you hear me? And good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. Well, first of all, thank you for organizing this seminar. I think it's a very important topic, and also thank you to Varvara for this overview of the struggles of indigenous peoples in the Arctic over especially mining of rare earth materials, the topic which is somehow, unfortunately, becoming more and more acute with literally every day, right? I think, well, listening to Varvara's commentary, I was just trying to kind of locate the role of law in all of that. And I suppose the various legal tools and avenues which can be used by indigenous peoples. But then at the same time, I felt that those legal avenues, they're very much influenced by political realities, right? By political realities of those countries. But anyway, so my perspective is a bit different. So instead of talking about the substance here, I would like to turn our attention to the topic of this webinar, right, which is the decolonization of environmental legal education. And my perspective here is as someone who is involved in co-directing a program, a master's program, and I'm very glad to see some of our students. The program in environmental policy and law, and I'm responsible for its major in law, environmental and climate law specialization. So as you know, and it's a bit kind of difficult for me because I don't know how many people are even interested in this in this curriculum or in this program, but I still wanted to outline these practical aspects of how this curriculum is built, right? And why I think from your perception, it feels perhaps that it doesn't integrate decolonial perspectives sufficiently enough, which I would actually disagree with, but I still I think it's important to understand how this works. And of course, we're talking about a university in Finland, which of course has its own peculiarities, right? So every country has its own national education system, etc. So as you know, we have this pretty, I would say, a very rich curriculum, a pretty wide choice of various courses that you can take. It's quite unusual actually for master's degree programs, and this has to do with national specifics. In Finland, as you know, one course you actually only earn 5 credits for completing one course, right? Whereas at many European universities it equals to 20 credits. So at many European universities, you basically take 3-4 courses a semester, and maybe another 3-4 courses in your second semester. In Finland, at the UF, you can actually take really a lot of courses on many different topics, right? Many of these courses are not designed specifically for this master's program. They are designed with the view of being offered to a wide variety of students, right? From different master's programs. but also from even sometimes bachelor's programs, especially this concerns courses which are kind of the core courses of the curriculum, like public EU law or international environmental law, international public international law. So the kind of the core courses, the basic courses. And then the electives, they are, well, many of them, they're indeed created with the view to serve these MDP APL students, right? I think another point about perhaps our program, but this also concerns many other programs. To be honest, I don't know, well, I know a couple maybe, but I don't know many master's degree programs in law, in environmental or climate law, which would follow a different approach. Most of these programs, because I think like law schools, typically they're quite, let's say, traditional, right? So they follow in legal education and building their legal curricula, they follow this jurisdiction-based approach. So we have several courses in international law, right? On different kind of international environmental law, you have international energy law, public international law, and then you have EU law, EU environmental law, etc. Right? So our curriculum, for many reasons, I think one of them is I think the strength of our research, right, is very much focuses on international and EU dimensions. What is missing from here? You would say what is missing is this kind of comparative legal perspective, right? So different legal system from different countries, from different regions, etc. And also other legal systems, like indigenous legal systems, etc. So this is definitely a gap. Another thing I would perhaps mention here in terms of legal education concerns this concept of academic freedom. And I don't know like to what extent it applies, because I have only worked in 3 countries. So I don't know to what extent this concept applies to other countries in Europe, but there is this concept of academic freedom. So professors actually, they have a considerable freedom in defining what they teach and how they teach. And this concept exists with the view to defend them from the various unwanted interference, for instance, political interference, right? So the state would kind of dictate professors on what to teach and how to teach and what approaches to take on. So this academic freedom is also something important to consider here in terms of how this curricula of legal education are built. I think another important point I would probably highlight that in many cases, professors, of course, they familiarize themselves with the current literature, right? And they teach they teach the main, they focus their teaching on the main debates in the current literature. And some areas of environmental law, they are perhaps more advanced on this decolonization discourse than others. Simply that there is more literature and this discourse is more prevalent, is more this topic is more commonly discussed, right? So I would say, like, for instance, in the context of international forests law, this is definitely the case. Perhaps mining, indigenous peoples, human rights, maybe in the case of, like, if we're talking about our MDP APL, maybe global environmental politics is the course, right? Definitely there's quite a bit of literature. But then there are areas of law where perhaps, at least I haven't seen much, like, for instance, EU environmental law. Even though there is definitely a case can be made for, like, discussing, let's say, the extraterritorial reach of EU environmental law, right? All these various ideas from the perspective of green colonialism. And I think there are some attempts there already that have been made. Or, like, for instance, energy law. I also haven't seen much, which kind of haven't seen much discussion or reflection on how this discourse, basically locating energy law vis-a-vis this decolonization discourse. So I think it's also something to keep in mind. Another, I think, point I would perhaps like to make, and I actually discussed it with some of the professors, not with all, admittedly, but with STEM. And apparently, there is actually kind of this wide recognition of the importance of the topic. And I think professors themselves would like to integrate it more, but perhaps it's not always clear how to do that. For instance, I've talked to Tuula Honkanen, who teaches international environmental law too, right? So which goes into this kind of different specific topics in international environmental law. And she, for instance, mentioned that, yes, this is definitely on her mind. And she, for her class in Arctic environmental law, upcoming class, she has already invited someone from someone to discuss this topic from the Indigenous perspective, Indigenous people's perspective. She also has, for a class on biodiversity law, international biodiversity law, we of course have Professor Elisa Morguera, as you know, who is very much familiar with Indigenous people's perspectives, and she definitely, a community perspective, and she definitely integrates this topic into her teaching. We also have recently, as you know, Professor Kati Kulavesi joined the Sami Climate Council, which is a very kind of interesting advisory committee, which brings together Sami indigenous peoples and scientists to try to bridge the gap between these two different epistemologies. So I think there are some movements there, but they're not maybe comprehensive yet. And we have recently actually conducted this exercise of revising our curriculum for the next 5 years. So this curriculum they're revised every 5 years for various reasons. And for the next 5-year period, we actually have several changes to that curriculum, which I think broadly, it's not like with the view to integrate this decolonization perspectives more, but I think it's more in the context of trying to perhaps pluralize it a little bit. Not a little bit, but quite significantly. Like, for instance, from the next year, I'm starting to teach a new course, which is, has this kind of unassuming title, Global Perspectives in Climate and Environmental Law. And the idea here is precisely to try to look at environmental, climate and environmental problems from the perspectives of different legal systems, and also beyond this jurisdiction-based approach. So, for instance, beyond focusing only on international dimensions or only on national dimensions, trying to look at from kind of across different levels from a multi-level perspective. This is going to be a student-led seminar, which means, and very kind of participatory. So, as you know, I very much like various formats, interactive formats, and I integrate them in my teaching for those who have taken my courses. So this is going to be a student-led course, which means that students actually can choose, can select collectively topics to be addressed during the next year. So during the first seminar, I will talk a little bit about like methodology and maybe theoretical frameworks, and then hopefully students will select some of the topics they would like to address during the year. Absolutely nothing in the world prevents them from focusing on, for instance, Indigenous law or kind of some type of Indigenous people's perspectives. So this is one change, and then there are also other changes in relation to human rights and environmental law. A new course which will be introduced in a couple of years, and then this global sustainability law, which is again more in the direction of this more kind of interdisciplinary perspective on law and trying to connect environmental law with economic growth and or degrowth rather perspectives. So looking at this kind of from a more holistic perspective. So there are kind of movements there, and there will be further changes. But I agree that much more can be done there. But I think like something perhaps I would like to mention while thinking about this topic of decolonizing environmental legal education, I've been thinking like what it actually means. And I came up with I'm sure that a lot has been written on the topic. I haven't done any research, and you perhaps are even more advanced than me. But thinking about this topic, I think there are several dimensions here. Well, first of all, when we think about decolonizing environmental legal education, we are thinking about kind of different ways of knowing things, right? Different epistemologies, different framings, different approaches. So, for instance, my field is international climate law. We're talking about third world approaches, right? We're talking about critical environmental law. We're talking about the lens of equity and justice, environmental and climate justice, different types of justice, etc. Then the second dimension is the level of topics. So what topics we cover, right? And how we approach them. So again, well, my field is climate law. So in climate law, in international climate law, we would definitely talk about, spend quite a bit of time on historical responsibility for climate law, right? We would talk about issues like loss and damage. We would talk about climate finance. Who has this obligation to provide climate finance? Who has the right to obtain climate finance? How this international climate finance is governed? How climate funds are governed, etc. So all these kind of topics which would perhaps be discussed, or like RED Plus, right? Or international carbon markets, etc., etc. We would perhaps talk about rights of nature. Not perhaps, but we would actually talk about rights of nature because it's very much connected to Indigenous people's issues. And I think rights of nature, again, I'm proud to say that we actually did discuss it this year in the introduction into environmental law in our course. So we would have epistemologists, we would have topics, but we would also have this dimension of what literature we use, who wrote that literature, right? Whether this literature comes only from Western universities, by Western scholars. And then I think the dimension of who is our faculty, who teaches us, right? So there are all these questions, different dimensions, which I think you would perhaps look at when you consider this topic of decolonizing legal, environmental legal education. I think this would be all from me as the first commentary, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yes, thank you very, very much. It's wonderful to hear you voicing all the questions we have and validating them as well. It's very nice to also for our viewers to have this list of questions. Maybe we can actually, after the event, put them together and also publish them on the website, the questions that you mentioned, because these are exactly the questions that Frida and me had when we were thinking about what is our education actually? What are questions that we should maybe ask if we wanted to be more critical? So this is very much a very comprehensive list of the questions that we have asked ourselves and that have come up with other students from our study.
I have to say, just to I spent 5 minutes making that list. So there's a lot of literature. I'm pretty sure many people have spent a lot of hours thinking about this topic. I just haven't had the time to look at that literature, just to kind of make sure that this is
yes.
not academic.
You already mentioned that there has been quite some development in the program at the UEF in particular, but you also said from your work experience from other countries, there might be some development into the right direction, so that there's more conversation with other professors that agree that this is something that they're keeping in mind. And we're now wondering, as maybe our first question to you, so we'll first ask a question to you, Julia, and then we have a question for Barbara. And afterwards, we would like to open the floor for any questions from the audience. If you don't have any, then we will ask the audience questions. So you can choose if you want to answer questions or ask questions. If you want to ask them, please put them in the Q&A box that we have for this event. But our first question would be, given this development that you have seen that already integrates a little bit more critical approaches in the building of the curriculum, what role do you see for university and staff to actually integrate this into the curriculum? Do you think that is something that should happen, or do you see it as part of the freedom for this academic for creating academic input? What role do you see for university staff and professors in creating more critical and more inclusive curriculum?
Well, that role is, of course, critical. At the same time, as I have mentioned already, what professors integrate in their teaching is, to some extent, is a reflection of the current state of the literature, right? And also the current state of thinking about these topics in a particular country or in a particular context. I would say that Finland is still quite new to this decolonization discourse. And it's a very complex matter in Finland, because Finland was once upon a time was a colony, right? Because it was part of the Finnish, of the Russian Empire. Before that, it was part of Sweden. But some would also claim that Finland was also, or is also a colonizing state in relation to Sami people, right? So I think that part, that complexity is very sensitive here in the country, and it's not like the discourse is just is very new.
So you see that there would be still a responsibility that could be taken up from the university staff in this, or?
The responsibility comes, of course, from I think it's impossible to ignore this discourse. Let's put it that way.
Okay, thank you. Then our next question would be to Barbara, and it would be almost a follow-up co-question to this question, and it would be, which role do you see for students in legal studies and environmental studies in teaching themselves, if the curriculum does not include critical points of views? Which role would you see for students to also integrate these things or educate themselves outside of their curriculum?
Thank you so much for your question. Yulia, thank you for your presentation and asking questions for us, how to decolonize curriculum. Actually, students you have a lot of power, because universities are for students. So you are the main power in universities, because as a staff member, I can say that we don't have neither academic freedom near power of students. So and same for I think same goes to departments of education, and always research system, right? So, and I think that students are main power which can change it. So you can demand change in curriculum as well. You can write your research papers, diplomas, etc., etc. So and then you also you have a right to have a consultants if your university don't have faculty members with needed expertise. So and I can tell you that I'm thinking about getting to the PhD program. And for example, what I want to do in my PhD program, it does not exist in one place. So I need to assemble different people from different countries to be my co-advisors. So that is also the opportunity to have a co-advisor or a consultant if it's something that you really want to have. Yes, and actually, again, you are power, and the university exists for you. So you are like customers. I don't like this idea about education as a service, but I don't know how to explain it more. Constituents, perhaps, as well. And of course, encouragement from me. I always love to see students' wild ideas and hopes, and you believe that something can be changed, and only you can change it. Because I think that when you get in older, I call my age as an age of responsibility, and dreams and responsibility often then they meet each other, then reality happens, of course. But again, without dreams, we would have a much less bright and good future. So that's why I think that you should dream wild and demand things happen, and then we can see a better future. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is, I think, also an open invitation for all of the students in environmental legal studies to join the feedback sessions that I know that at least the UAF holds at least once per semester, where your input is asked for the curriculum. So pointing fingers at all of you students, go to those meetings and demand change if you see that there is problematic things being discussed, or that you don't see enough inclusive materials presented to you in the curriculum. Please go to those meetings and demand the changes that is given to you in the spaces to demand. And yeah, Julia, please.
Thank you. I cannot agree more also with Varvara and with you, Anastasia. Indeed, students have a lot of agency. And you have already mentioned this feedback sessions, which are kind of more like program level sessions, right? But also every course has a feedback element to it, right? You can give feedback on your course to your course teacher. And this is another way of also trying to suggest something to your teacher. Varvara also mentioned the choice of essays, topics for your essays and for your thesis. It's also like one way how you can also address this these perspectives in your work, right? And when you, for instance, in this feedback sessions, I would suggest adopting a cooperative and productive intonation rather than a confrontational intonation. I think this would be perhaps more effective. Another thing which came to my mind, and this concerns, I think, MTP EPL especially, every year, so like in the last years, definitely last year and the next year, since I'm just doing admissions for the next year, we are definitely having more and more students from the global south, right? And I think it's very important, since we're talking about these topics, it's kind of interesting, of course, to talk on behalf of someone. But when you actually have that someone and those groups, I think it's also very important to engage actually with the students from in your own program and hear their views. And they may actually have a bit of different perspective on the same issues, or maybe a similar perspective. And you might come across some interesting angles to this topic and various complexities. This would be my suggestion.